people are old enough to have been around when Pearl Harbor happened back in December 7th, 1941. I was a little 19-year-old sophomore at UNO and wondering what's going to happen to me when my number comes up, because when we got into 1942, we were really getting mobilized for World War II. And I decided that I would like to be in the Air Force. I thought I'd like to be a pilot. And so what I did then was make an application. I had to take a written exam down at the airport, at the post office. Had to go down to Offutt Air Base and take a physical. And found out I was qualified to try to be a pilot. I don't know, try not to bore you with a lot of details, but I wonder if you have any idea what it took back in those old days when we were flying those planes that were not heated, they were not pressurized, and by today's standard, it's like World War I vintage. I'll just give you a quick thumbnail idea of what it was like to get started to become an Air Force pilot. The first thing they did was send me to Jefferson Barracks, Missouri. I was Private 171-20108, I remember that. And we learned how to march, and we learned a little bit about the theory of the Army, what they did, and code of conduct and that sort of thing. And of course, had to learn KP, everybody had that. But then I was surprised they sent me to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and at a teacher's college. And they converted an old field house into barracks, and we went to school. And at that time, I was an aviation student. And we still had our marching and all that sort of thing. Learned a little bit about meteorology and the theory of flight and what the purpose of the air, it wasn't Air Force, it was Air Corps, and of course we called it the Corps back in those days. We were through with that. Was sent to Santa Ana, California for a classification center. And there's where they decided whether you would be a pilot, navigator, bombardier, or none of the above. And the tests were rather strenuous, and the weeding out process was pretty large. Fortunately, I passed that, and I'm up to the other side of the base, and I was now an aviation cadet. There the theory was, or the emphasis was, physical education, discipline, even like Marines, we had discipline too. We even had to eat square meals when we were in the mess hall. Anyway, it took a few months there, and my first acquaintance with an airplane was in Oxnard, California, an old open cockpit biplane, BT-13 was Stearman. Maybe somebody knew what that was. It looked like World War I combat plane. And that was the first plane I ever flew. And my very first plane ride, my instructor sat in front. We used a Gosport tube that didn't have an annual radio. Is your seatbelt fastened down? Went like that, upside down, and I'm hanging about this far from my seat on the seatbelt, scared to death. While he did inverted stalls, and slow rolls, and snap rolls, and loops, and stalls. A friend of mine had the same experience, except the student wasn't told he was going to do that, and he fell out. But we all had parachutes, so we made his first parachute. We did have simulated parachute jumps in classification center as cadets, rather. But past that, oh, incidentally, we had 5 students to each airplane, and of the 5, only 2 of us made it to basic. The other 3 washed out. We sent to Chico, California. Now we flew a nice metal low-wing airplane, a Volt-T BT-13. We called it the Volt-T vibrator. Anybody put it in the stall, it would just shake something fierce. There we learned to land, take off and land at night. We did a little cross-country. We got acquainted with the link trainer to fly instruments. And the washout rate wasn't so bad. Then on to advanced, twin engine advanced, Cessna UC-78. I thought I was going to be a P-38 pilot, twin fighter. No, they didn't need fighter pilots. We learned a lot of formation flying, a lot of navigation, a lot of link trainer. And upon graduation, I finally was a second lieutenant and had my flowers. That was from January of 43 till May of 44. That's how long it took just to get that far. Next up, you could ask what you wanted, but a major told me, if you ask for fighters, you're going to be on a bomber, one way or the other. So you might as well ask for a bomber pilot, because otherwise you're going to be in the right seat still flying bombers. So I asked for a B17, and I got my wish. After that, I had a 7-8 day leave, just time enough to catch a train and go to Omaha and get married to my college sweetheart. Next up was Roswell, New Mexico. And there I was introduced to the B17. I hope everybody knows what a flying fortress looks like. I was just a young little snot. Anyway, the B17 was the biggest airplane I'd ever seen. In fact, at that point in time, they were flying DC-3s out of Eppley Field. That was the biggest airplane you'd see. That was before the DC-4s. The B-17 was a real challenge for all of us, because a big 4-engine airplane at that time was quite a big thing. But we did a lot of, well, I'm backtrack. Before they let us fly the thing or even take off, we had to sit in the cockpit alone where all the various gauges and levers and whatever were. And then we had to sit in there blindfolded and point to them and use them. And we had to learn about the engines and all the various components. And we did a lot of high altitude navigation flying. Now remember this, back in those days, our planes were not pressurized, so every time we went up in altitude, we had to wear an oxygen mask. And if you got up into the 25, 30,000, well, usually 25,000 feet range, usually 30, 40, 50 below zero. And I'll tell you, they didn't have good heaters in those days. Anyway, after that, I was sent to Dyersburg, Tennessee, and met my crew. This is my crew before we went overseas. At that time, a B-17 crew was 10 people. There would be the bombardier up in the nose, then he would man 250 caliber machine guns. The navigator was on the left side of the nose. He had also 2 machine guns. Back up in the cockpit, behind the pilot and co-pilot, was a top turret gunner and also a flight engineer. And he manned 2 50 caliber machine guns. Back to the bomb bay door, the radio room, he had one up on the top. A little farther back underneath was the belly turret. And he manned 2 50 calibers. He had a loaded job sitting down there underneath. Then a little farther back, the right waist gunner, left waist gunner, and tail gunner. When you got them all added up, we had 13 50 caliber machine guns. And that's why it was called the Flying Fortress. But it was a tough bird anyway. They'll give you an idea. I call my ship Heaven Can Wait. I thought that was very appropriate. And this is what looked like in formation. Usually we take off on a mission, and if it was a maximum effort, it'd be around 36 airplanes. Now you have the squadron putting up their planes, then there's 3 squadrons in the group, and then if we were on, say, a maximum effort, sometimes we put up over 1,000 airplanes on a raid in Germany. And the whole concept at that time, that every 2 minutes, a group of aircraft would go over a given point. And this 2 minute pace allowed us to have our P-51 fighters fly cover for us. But to get 1,000 planes going over a given point, it took a great deal of organizing. So we'd take off and we'd circle in a small orbit. They'd get our group squadron, then get our group together. They would join into the wing, and if it was a maximum effort, into the whole 8th Air Force stream. Sometimes it'd be 2 hours after I started the engines that I'd leave England and cross over towards Germany. Now, from our base in England, it was 600 miles to Berlin and 600 miles back. A lot of fighters, a lot of time to get their fighters up to at us. And of course, know where the heck we were at, because if you remember a lot of the pictures, we left contrails. They could see us for an hour before we got there. This is a picture of a typical checklist on a B17. And that doesn't bother me, but these computers do. But we have and they were very strict about following all the checklists. This is what flight looked like. Even at 26,000 feet where we were flying, they could reach up. And what they do, they usually have 88 millimeters guns firing together, and they would try to figure out where you're going to be at a certain time, and they'd come up in bursts of 4 and shoot maybe 4, 4, 4, 4, and just walk up at you. Here's one actually exploding. The rule of thumb I learned was, if you can see the bursts, if you can hear the burst, or if you get concussion from it, you're going to have flak in your airplane. Small ones just go through it, you can hear it going through, but big ones can tear a plane completely apart. So you sometimes, you come home with a few holes, other times you see a plane just explode. And one of the jobs we had, of course, when one was hit and they bailed out, we had to call count parachutes to give them an idea at briefing what the chances are of people being saved and being maybe POWs. We had learned phrases in German, French, and even Russian, because when we were on our deep penetration raids, we were closer to the Russian lines than we to our own. And even though they were always most friendly, it was better than crashing in the Channel or in Germany. So we always carried those. We also had electrically heated underwear. And then we had fleece-lined suits, jackets, pants, and trousers in case the electrical system went out, because it would be 40, 50 below, and we'd be up there for 5, 6 hours. And then wouldn't be unusual to be awakened maybe at 1:30 in the morning for a mission, have breakfast, and we go to the briefing room and get all the information. By the time we got our flight gear, got out to the airplane, pre-flighted it, it would be 2 hours, 3 hours just before we got there. This is what it looked like loading up bombs. These look like 250 pounders. Usually we carry 500 and 1,000 pounders. We can carry 8 tons. This is a formal record of missions I flew. I was able to get 28 missions, and the war ended. Earlier in the war, if you survived 25 missions, you could go home. And we had fighter cover, they raised it to 30. So the war ended before I could get my 30 in, but I didn't need those 30, I was glad to get them. I got to see a lot of Germany. We got to see a lot of places go out. It was real scary because every time a plane went down, you're talking about 9 or 10 men. Later in the war, we eliminated the bombardier and flew the tight formations and dropped our bombs on the lead ship. Had saturation bombing, and it was very effective. This is what our little friends looked like, a P-51 fighter. That's fighter cover for us. Towards the end of the war, I saw my first jet fighter, an ME-262. And he came out of the clouds. They had made they didn't have many of them, but they made sneak attacks. And he came over and shot at us, and we shot at him. And there were 3 of those sitting up there at 1 o'clock high. I got on the radio and called them, and they dropped their tags and went into a scream and dive, and that ME-262 with the jet just left them. So we were glad they didn't have a lot of them. They would have raised a lot more havoc. ME-109s are bad enough. But we lost more planes overall to flag than we did to fighters. This is we used for a poop sheet of an actual mission. And we went to briefing room, we got one of these, and they tell you when you start your engines and when you taxi in the runway and all the frequencies and all the checkpoints and the times when you leave England, when you go to the channel, when you get your IP, the initial point. When we got to what they call the IP, that's the initial point. From there to the target, your formation as tight as you could get it. No evasive action, because we wanted to drop a good pattern. And that's when you got real nervous, because you couldn't do any evasive action. But when bombs away, we usually lose about 500 feet to get a little airspeed to get the heck out of there. And this one here will show you, so that little arrow was a lead ship, 2 wingmen, and I had a ship below and mine, and 2 wingmen. There was 1,000 planes on out over the continent that day. That's my navigator and myself. One of the nice things after when the war was ending, let me backtrack. When our troops went through D-Day, they bypassed one little pocket of Germans and kept it going. And we decided, of course, we're going to get them sooner or later. Well, the general that was this was in the Netherlands, decided that they were going to lose the war. And they were starving because they flooded the dikes. And that whole area was underwater. They didn't have any food. So he made a deal with the 8th Air Force and the Royal Air Force to drop food. And that's what I did. I made 3 food drop missions. We'd go over the Netherlands, usually with Amsterdam, as I recall, and we'd just go above stalling speed and free fall food to them. I made 3 of those. And I read later that between us and the Royal Air Force, we dropped over 11 million meals to those people. And it was kind of gratifying to drop something that was constructive rather than destructive. This, almost you people may not know this, but if you flew a complete mission, 30, you joined the Lucky Bastard Club. And since the war ended, I got you 28 to give me one of those. There's a scrapbook over here with all this in it, if you would like to see it later. Well, this is interesting. The day after the war, we had a cook's tour. All the people, the cooks, and all the people in England that supported us so that we could get our planes in the air. We wanted them to get a chance to see what we'd done. So we loaded up about a dozen each airplane and made this long round trip here. And then see, and we could see what our bombs had done. It was particularly fun because when we got to Paris, I remember going over Paris and the top of the Eiffel Tower was way up there and I was down, and that was a no-no, but we did things like that. When the war ended, I had a chance to fly home. So this is my crew on the first row, and then we had 9 passengers and luggage, all in that one airplane to fly home. If you've ever been inside of a B17, it is built for comfort, and there's so much room in there. We put all the luggage into Bombay, and we took off from England, went to Scotland, to Iceland, Goose Bay, Labrador, and then Linden, Massachusetts. But everybody was tickled to get an air ride home rather than take the slow boat that they would have had to wait for. This is what the cockpit looks a little bit right there. Give you a little idea. This was taken after the war. B17 came into Offutt Air Base, or to that lake. And a bunch of us from our Kiwanis Club went to see it. The next thing I know, they wired me, and I was on the 6 o'clock news. I've kind of rambled on. Anybody have any questions? I might tell you this, if I didn't mention it, from the time I got into the Air Corps till I got my wings, that's 2 years. And that's why I got in on the tail end of the war instead of in the middle. And I'm very grateful for that. I remember one time I came back from the mission and I didn't think I'd have enough fuel to get home, and I was able to land in Liège, Belgium, because our troops had secured that area and refueled. One of my buddies says I can make it, and he ended up ditching in the channel. But it took off, and over here there's Antwerp with all those barrage balloons. Oh, I'll just go over and have a look. And all of a sudden, boom, 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 about 4 bursts of flag in front of me. Nobody flew over Antwerp. They would have shot us down. Because they did know that the Germans had patched up a couple of B-17s, were using them as a bait. I'm through unless somebody has questions. Yes?
Were you a part of the Berlin airlift?
I didn't hear.
Were you part of the Berlin airlift?
The what?
The Berlin airlift in 46, I think.
No, I got to go home. I flying these guys home.
And all those missions, did all of your crew return with you?
Did all of your crew return with you? Did you lose
My tail gunner was wounded over Leipzig. He's the only one that was wounded. I was on a mission one time where Flack had taken the heels off the waist gunner's boots and just peeled them off. And at debriefing, he was like, and he had black and blue because when the end of his face went in, he hit the side of the airplane. One last thought. I like flying, I still do. So I joined the reserves, and I flew a C-46 Cruise Commandos out of Offutt Air Base. So when Korea came along, I thought I'd be a troop carrier pilot. No. They decided if I could fly those, I could fly B-29. So I got trained to fly a B-29, ready to go over to Korea as a replacement. And they converted our base to the B-36. You know what that is? That's the big one. There's one out at SAC. It has 6 pusher engines, a jet pod on each end. It'll fly 20-some hours nonstop without refueling. That's the last airplane I flew in service. But I flew afterwards in business, small Cessnas, Comanches, anything they let me have. Now that I'm retired, I fly off the handle once in a while.